Canada made, as I suppose all of you would know, an absolutely unprecedented offer in my lifetime to help finance the bridge, understanding that Michigan has had some very bitter years recently. And the administration in Washington has pledged to offer it. So the deal seems to now set itself up as $1 billion of other people's money to start a project which will employ thousands and thousands of people in this state to build infrastructure that's going to make trade easier and more competitive in a state which lives for trade. So it actually seems like a very good deal to me. Actually, it seems like the best deal anybody ever got offered. And I hope Michigan will say yes to this opportunity. I salute Governor Snyder for his leadership and the legislature for your deliberations on it. On that note, I was asked to just talk a little bit about public-private partnerships. And that's a very popular phrase in Canada. We use the model a lot for a lot of different things. I'm not an expert on it. I've worked on a few of them. We built a huge bridge between New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island using that model. And we've used it for highways and hospitals and the like. The basic model is pretty good, and it works easiest where you have a highly finite capital project. You can see that it's being built, you can see its progress, you know what is coming to the end. You can see when the contractors or the people who own it have done what they're going to do, or if they have failed to do what they've said they can do, you can pre-design all the punishment mechanisms that you need. And that's the simplest form. But in Canada, we've used public-private partnership for a lot of other things as well, trying to attach the public interest to the private profit motive. And it can work very, very well. Open-ended things, ongoing service requirements, those are harder. They are harder because circumstances change, inputs change. The people that own the facility have their requirements. They're coming back and discussing the ways in which things have changed, and they want a break, or maybe the state comes back and says you're making far more money than we thought, and so we want to get back in on the action. The other thing that the President and the Prime Minister announced earlier this year was cooperation on a working group to deal with regulatory cooperation. And that got to be the most boring thing ever to be worth billions and billions of dollars. Between Canada and the United States, we trade every product imaginable, every household good, every manufactured product. And we have many, many, many different layers of regulatory oversight so that things like fortified orange juice, which all of you drink, is considered a drug in Canada, so the Canadians have a special look at that. Deodorant that is made in Tennessee and comes to Canada has to have a special additive for Canadian underarms, which are totally different from U.S. underarms. Your ambassador in Ottawa, Mr. Jacobson, makes a pretty good thing. He likes, I think it's Wheaties. And he pulls out the Wheaties box and he says, this is an American Wheaties box and this is a Canadian Wheaties box. And the difference is that this one has more niacin. I don't know what niacin is, but it's worth millions and millions of dollars to have a different amount of niacin in I think it's the Canadian Wheaties. I used to be in transport. You'd see these trucks going around. Used to deal with them. They'd have like 10 or 11 licenses on the back of the truck because they got 10 or 11 or 20 different jurisdictions they might go through, and they all license separately. They all have little different responsibilities. Somebody is benefiting from this, but it isn't you. It isn't me. It isn't the consumer. A lot of people are benefiting, and so the pushback is going to be considerable. However, I mention this because that's another thing. The White House is quite excited about this. The border has obviously got heavy political implications, the issues of security that I was touching on, but nobody thinks that bad regulation, inefficient, duplicative regulation is a good idea. So the White House has an officer on that, Simon, and we have some people working on it, and they've been encouraging me to say to businesses, if you have partners on the other side of the border, if you can come to us with both sides of the border and say, here's a regulatory situation, we think we could work it out, that will obviously speed the plow. And so they're very interested in it. They've already had really interesting approaches. The American Meat Council sat down with the Canadians. They spent an afternoon, and came back with a proposal that they brought to both working groups in the United States and Canada on how regulation concerning meat could be simplified. And you can see, when the ball got rolling here, this could get seriously profitable for businesses, while properly done, make no impact on public safety or public benefit. I will say the final thing in our U.S. program, we're trying to stay out of Washington. And I said to my boss, you could go up on Capitol Hill and set yourself on fire. You wouldn't be the first guy to do that. It's very difficult to get attention in the media and among the legislators in Washington. But I said there are extremely important communities of political leadership in the governors, in the legislatures of the key states that deal with us. And they are very close to their business communities, and so are we. So what you're seeing, part of my visit here today and part of Perrin's visit a month ago, is a part of a plan that we have to try to make friends and influence people away from Washington on the very pragmatic interests of business, self-interest, investment, profit. We've done that on these issues concerning the border. We're doing a little bit on energy. We think that the dialogue between Canada and the United States on energy is extremely critical. Canada is the largest energy source, ineffectively the largest in the world now. We're the second largest source of hydropower. We're the third largest source of gas. We're the sixth largest source of oil. But we sit on the largest supply of oil after Saudi Arabia. This state, Illinois, Ohio, are oil sands states. You're burning almost exclusively oil sands oil now. And also, all of our pipelines come down through the state and back up into the Canada. If you want a picture of an integrated industry, Canadian oil comes to the United States so it can enter into Ontario. One of the projects we've been talking about is one that you've seen in the press called Keystone. It's a huge pipeline which is going to be extended, we hope, from Cushing down to the Gulf. Keystone has the potential to move 1 million barrels. That's 11% of America's daily use. So there are gigantic opportunities in this, and one of the big challenges concerns the environmental debate. Canada, I would say, is eager to have that dialogue. I have an approach which you may or may not appreciate. I say if you mine it, if you ship it, if you refine it, if you burn it, we're all part of the responsibility cycle. People who are in, name the state, Georgia, who are burning Canadian oil and complaining about Canadian environmental practices, it's understandable, but it isn't going to do. If you're burning the oil, you're part of the issue, and we need collectively to address what kind of environmental standards we want to have, how we want to enforce them, who we want to have enforcing them, and that I think is a real urgent issue for the future. I'm going to conclude by just quoting something that I like a lot. You know who Abraham Maslow was? Maslow's hierarchy of values. Yeah. He said, "I can feel guilty about the past, and I can feel apprehensive about the future, but only now can I act." And I have that actually on my desk. If something needs to be done, it needs to be done now. If Canada's relationship with the United States needs to be cultivated and improved, if we need to cross some of these barriers, now is the time we need to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.